Hello, my name's Lisa. You won't believe what happened to me. My brother-in-law mocked me for losing my $75,000 lakeside cabin, but that wasn't the worst part. At dinner, when I thought the family might stand by me, the police showed up and blocked their driveway. My own family stood by as he humiliated me. And that's just the beginning. The lies, the deceit, they've been hiding something far worse. And it's all about to come crashing down. Hook 2. Ever been betrayed by your own family? I thought they were my support. But the truth? It's far darker. After all the mocking, all the lies, when I thought things couldn't get worse, that's when the police showed up. And what they revealed next? Well, let's just say, everything I thought I knew was a lie. The truth will leave you speechless. Stay tuned. The sun was setting low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the table. I sat at the head of it, my fork idly poking at the mashed potatoes that had grown cold. Dinner at my in-laws' house was always a mix of forced smiles and tense silences, but tonight felt different. It was the familiar, caustic air of mockery in my brother-in-law Derek's voice that hung in the room like a thick cloud. I wasn't just the subject of their quiet dismissals tonight, I was the punchline of their cruel joke. I mean, Lisa, you really lost a $75,000 lakeside cabin? How does that even happen? Derek chuckled, his eyes glinting with that all-too-familiar smugness. My stomach turned. The others joined in. My sister Sarah let out a short laugh, eyes flickering over to me with that look, the one that said she'd never quite seen me as anything other than the little sister who could never get it together. My mother-in-law chimed in with a strained smile. Well, it's a learning experience, isn't it, dear? Learning experience. I had to bite back the bitterness rising in my throat. They were all so quick to downplay my efforts, so quick to label my losses as something trivial, something I could laugh off. But I wasn't laughing. I looked around the room, trying to calm the boiling anger inside me. My father-in-law, his face frozen in the permanent scowl he always wore, was chewing slowly, oblivious to the tension building. And my husband, Chris, he'd said nothing. It was always like this. He'd stay quiet, avoiding confrontation, just letting them dig at me. They'd all pretend it was a joke, but I could feel the sting of every word they threw at me. I wasn't surprised anymore. I was used to this. The comments, the dismissals. I'd spent years working tirelessly, building a life that no one could seem to respect. It wasn't about the cabin. It was about everything. The sacrifices I'd made, the late nights I spent working to get ahead, the things I'd given up, and they laughed at it. They had no idea how hard I'd fought for that cabin. I'd put everything I had into it, every dime, every ounce of energy. I wasn't stupid. I knew that losing it was a mistake, but it was mine to make. They couldn't see that. They didn't understand what it took to even get there. I pushed the plate away, suddenly losing my appetite. Derek's voice cut through the silence again, louder now. Well, at least it's gone, right? No need to keep a money pit around. Just a little bump in the road, Lisa. A bump in the road. That's how they all saw it. A minor inconvenience. Not a failure, not a setback, not a deep wound that still throbbed in my chest every time I thought about it. It was just a joke to them. My mind raced. How had I ended up here? Why did I always allow them to treat me like this? I wanted to snap, to yell at Derek, to tell them all what I really thought. But I couldn't. The anger was too much, and I was afraid that if I lashed out, I'd be the one they'd all turn on, the one they'd dismiss even more. So, I said nothing. I kept my mouth shut and forced a smile, nodding along with their mocking laughter. I could feel my heart beat faster, the frustration pushing me to the edge. How could they be so blind to everything I'd done? As the conversation shifted to another topic, I let my mind wander, drifting back to the countless moments when I'd felt invisible in this family. I had worked so hard to build something, anything, but they saw me as a joke. I could almost hear my own voice, echoing from years ago. You'll never make it, not like them, not like Derek. You're just not cut out for success. That was the part that hurt the most, the words that replayed in my head, the feeling that I would never be good enough. Every time I succeeded, there was always someone waiting to knock me down. Derek was always the first in line. I had been there before, the girl who tried so hard to fit in, to prove herself, to earn their approval. But I always fell short. I excused myself from the table, desperate for air. I walked out onto the back porch, the cool breeze helping to clear my head. But it didn't help. The anger and frustration still simmered, my mind unable to escape the cruel words that had been flung at me. I leaned against the railing, trying to catch my breath. I had spent so many years trying to meet their expectations, trying to prove my worth. But all it ever got me was ridicule. I wanted to scream, to shout at them all. But deep down, I knew that wouldn't help. It never did. They would still see me as the failure, the one who never could get things right. But something was changing inside me. I was tired, tired of being the joke, tired of being the one they all laughed at. Maybe I couldn't fix everything, but I could fix this. The anger I felt wasn't going away. I wasn't going to let it go this time. It was time for a change. My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out, my eyes scanning the screen. It was a call from a lawyer, someone I didn't recognize. I answered the phone with a cautious hello, still reeling from the dinner. "Miss Lisa?" the voice on the other end asked. "This is Ryan Lawson. I'm a lawyer representing the buyer of your Lakeside cabin. We've run into a bit of a problem with the sale. There are some legal complications, and the authorities are now involved." My stomach dropped. Authorities? Legal complications? The words didn't make sense. I was stunned, the phone shaking slightly in my hand. "Wait, what do you mean?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "There's a potential issue with the transaction. I can't get into specifics just yet, but we need to discuss it further." "It might be bigger than just a bad investment," he said. "This could be a serious matter." My mind spun. Serious matter? The loss of my cabin wasn't just about the money, it was about everything. But now, hearing those words, there was something more, something bigger. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't just my mistake. There was more to it. My heart pounded in my chest. This wasn't just a loss. This could be the beginning of something much bigger. "Okay," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind. "I'll be in touch." I hung up the phone and stared out into the yard. I had no idea what was coming next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them laugh at me anymore. The phone call had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. Standing there in my kitchen, holding the receiver with trembling hands, the words from the lawyer echoed in my mind like a constant nagging buzz. Authorities? Legal complications? My cabin, a symbol of everything I had worked so hard for, was being questioned, like it had been a mere object of chance, as if I didn't even have control over it. It wasn't just a financial loss. It was my dignity, my years of sacrifice, and I was starting to feel like I was losing everything. After hanging up, I sat down at the kitchen table, the weight of the call sinking in. It wasn't just the loss of the cabin that hurt. It was the lack of respect I had received from my family. Derek, my brother-in-law, had been the loudest voice in mocking me, ridiculing my choices, and laughing at my failure. He never saw the work behind the decision, the long nights, the planning, the sacrifices. To him, it was a joke. To my family, it was just another one of my learning experiences, something to be swept under the rug. I replayed the dinner conversation in my head, Derek's smug smile, his tone so full of arrogance. "How does someone lose a cabin?" he had asked, his laughter ringing in my ears. The others, all too eager to follow his lead, chimed in. They called it a bad investment, shrugged it off, and moved on to the next topic as if my loss didn't matter. But it mattered to me, it always had. What they didn't understand was that it wasn't just about money. The cabin had been a dream, a way to prove to myself and to them that I could make it on my own. And now, hearing Derek's dismissive remarks, I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew something I didn't. It was too convenient, too easy for him to laugh at me. That seed of doubt I'd buried deep inside me was starting to sprout. I took a deep breath and walked to the living room, scanning the pile of paperwork from the sale. And there it was again, the transaction, the figures, the promises made. I flipped through the papers, trying to make sense of it all. But the more I looked, the more questions I had. Derek had always been quick to dismiss me, but now I was wondering if there was more to it. Had he been involved in the sale? Had he known something about the deal before I did? A flashback hit me. A conversation from a few months ago, one I had almost forgotten. Derek had mentioned offhandedly that he'd always wanted to get rid of that cabin. He had laughed when he said it, but something about the way he said it stuck with me. Maybe it was just a passing comment, but I had the distinct feeling that it wasn't. Maybe Derek had been planning this all along. I felt a sudden chill, and the room seemed to close in on me. This wasn't just bad luck. There had to be more to it. I stood up from the couch, my thoughts racing. I needed answers, but I couldn't rely on my family to give them to me. And I had to find out for myself. I had to figure out who was behind this, who had manipulated me into this mess. I grabbed my phone, dialing a lawyer's number I had saved from a few weeks ago, the one who had initially handled the cabin's paperwork, the one who could maybe tell me if there was something more hidden beneath the surface. After a few rings, the lawyer picked up. "Miss Lisa, how can I help you?" His voice was calm, measured. "I need to know everything about the sale of the cabin," I said, my words coming out in a rush. "The authorities are involved, and I don't know what's going on. Was there something more to the deal than I was told?" There was a pause on the other end of the line before he spoke again, this time with a hint of caution. "I'd advise you to be careful. There's been a complication with the transaction. I can't go into too many details right now, but it's possible that fraud was involved. You might want to consider looking into it further." Fraud? I felt my heart race. The words hit me like a slap. This wasn't just about the money I'd lost. It was something bigger. Someone had taken advantage of me, and I was going to find out who. I hung up the phone, my mind already working through the next steps. I had to get to the bottom of this. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not Derek, not anyone. The anger I felt was something I hadn't experienced in years, but it was burning bright now. I wasn't just a victim. I wasn't just going to let them laugh at me. I sat back down at the kitchen table, flipping through the papers once again. This time, I wasn't looking at the numbers. I was looking for something else, anything that didn't add up. I was done letting this go. I was done being the punchline. It was time to take action. The phone buzzed again. Another call. I glanced at the screen and my breath caught in my throat. It was from the buyer's lawyer. I picked it up quickly, my hands shaking. "Hello? Ms. Lisa?" The lawyer's voice was cool and professional. "We've uncovered some new information regarding the sale of your cabin. I believe we need to meet. This issue is more complex than we initially thought." My heart stopped for a moment. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. My stomach turned with both excitement and fear, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't walking away from this. Not anymore. "Let's meet," I said, my voice steady. "I'll be there." I couldn't shake the thoughts swirling around in my head. The more I replayed the dinner, the more the anger inside me built up. I wasn't just upset about losing the cabin. It was the way they treated me, the mockery, the way they dismissed everything I worked for. Derek's smirk still burned in my memory. "How could you lose it?" His words echoed over and over, like they were carved into my brain. They didn't understand, and they probably never would. They were so quick to laugh, to judge, to dismiss, but I wasn't going to let this go anymore. I sat in my study, the weight of the documents on my desk heavy in front of me. I had all the papers, sale agreements, contracts, receipts. But now I was seeing them with new eyes. What if this wasn't just bad luck? What if it was something more? I had always known something was off about the sale, but it wasn't until now, until Derek's careless behavior, that I realized it wasn't a coincidence. The mocking tone, the way he brushed off my loss as if it meant nothing, it all felt too orchestrated. I had been a fool, thinking it was just a mistake, but no more. Now I knew, deep down, that Derek's role in this was more than just incidental. He had orchestrated this somehow, played a part in something bigger than me, and that was a thought I couldn't ignore. The sound of my phone buzzing brought me back to reality. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the name on the screen. It was from the lawyer, the one I'd called earlier. I hadn't expected a response so soon. I picked up the phone, and the lawyer's voice came through, cool and professional. Ms. Lisa, we found some irregularities with the sale. I think you might be dealing with something more than a simple mistake. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? There are discrepancies in the financials. Derek may have misrepresented some details. If he's involved in this, it could be fraud. Fraud. The word hit me like a punch in the gut. It wasn't just about the money I'd lost. This was bigger. Someone had been trying to pull the wool over my eyes, and I had to know who. I set the phone down, my hands trembling. The walls felt like they were closing in around me. This wasn't just about the cabin anymore. This was about justice, and I wasn't going to let Derek or anyone else get away with it. I sat there for a moment, trying to gather myself. I had a decision to make. I could sit here and let it all pass by, or I could do something about it. I could fight back. But I had to be smart. I had to be strategic. Confronting Derek head-on would only give him the chance to twist things around. I needed evidence, something solid. I glanced at the papers in front of me. The lawyer had suggested I gather everything I could. So that's what I would do. I would start digging deeper, looking at every angle, finding the cracks in Derek's story. I wasn't going to let him win this. As I gathered more documents and made notes, a flood of emotions hit me. There was anger, yes, but also a sense of empowerment. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control. I wasn't just a victim of circumstance. I was going to take charge, and I wasn't going to let Derek's games dictate my life anymore. I pulled up a list of potential lawyers I could contact. One in particular stood out, a criminal lawyer with experience in fraud cases. I dialed the number, heart pounding as the phone rang. I had to know what my next steps should be. The stakes were too high to make any mistakes. The lawyer answered quickly. Miss Lisa, I understand you're looking into a potential fraud case. What can I help you with? I exhaled slowly, trying to calm my racing thoughts. I need to know if there's a way to legally pursue this. If Derek was involved, if he manipulated the sale of my cabin, I want to take action. There was a pause on the line. It sounds like you might be dealing with something serious. If you want to go through with this, we'll need to gather evidence and go over the details of the sale. I can help you with that, but I'd advise being cautious. This could escalate quickly. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I'm ready. Let's do this. With that, I hung up the phone, feeling the weight of the decision settle over me. This was just the beginning. I had a plan, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. Confronting Derek, taking him on, this wasn't just a matter of legalities. It was a matter of exposing the lies, of holding him accountable for everything he'd done. But there was something else, something I hadn't quite realized until now. This wasn't just about the cabin, it was about my life, my family, my place in all of this. I had been the one they dismissed, the one they mocked, but no more. I wasn't going to sit in the background anymore. I wasn't going to let Derek, or anyone else, push me around. The thought of him, of his smug face, made my blood boil. I was done being silent, done letting him get away with everything. This was my fight now, and I was ready for it. The next step was clear. I had to confront him. I had to get him to admit what he'd done. I couldn't wait any longer. I was tired of being patient, tired of pretending everything was fine. It was time for the truth to come out, no matter what it cost. I stood up from the table, the weight of my decision hanging in the air. This wasn't just about justice. It was about me, about reclaiming what was mine. Sitting at my desk, papers scattered around me, I could feel the anxiety bubbling up inside me. I had spent days, no, weeks, gathering everything I could find. It was all leading up to this moment, the confrontation with Derek. I knew it would be messy, that there would be fallout, but I was prepared, or at least I thought I was. The weight of the situation was starting to sink in. This wasn't just about the cabin anymore. It was about my dignity, my place in this family. How had I allowed myself to be treated like this for so long? I couldn't even remember the last time anyone truly listened to me, the last time my efforts were acknowledged. It was always Derek's voice echoing louder, always his laugh that filled the room. And I was done with it. The tension was palpable. My heart raced every time I thought about the dinner, the mockery, the pity they'd shown. Derek's face was still fresh in my mind, that smug grin, the way he casually tossed aside my feelings. "It's just a cabin, Lisa. You'll get over it," he had said. Just a cabin. But to me, it was more than that. It was a symbol of everything I had worked for, everything I had lost. I gathered my thoughts, my determination growing stronger by the second. There was no turning back now. I had the evidence, I had the lawyer on my side, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. But the fear still lingered. Would anyone stand with me, or would I be left alone in this battle? I glanced at the clock. It was getting late, but I couldn't stop now. I wasn't going to back down, not this time. I needed to confront Derek, to expose the truth, and I needed to do it now. I had no idea how he would react, but I couldn't afford to wait any longer. I had to confront him at the family gathering. There was no better time. I would make him face the consequences of his actions, whatever it took. But as the clock ticked, the weight of the decision made my chest tighten. This could change everything. The sound of my phone vibrating on the desk snapped me out of my thoughts. I hesitated, staring at the screen. It was the lawyer. My heart skipped a beat. I answered quickly, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. "Miss Lisa, we have a new development. Someone from Derek's past has come forward with information that could change everything." My stomach dropped. "What kind of information?" The lawyer paused. "It seems Derek might have been involved in something larger than just the cabin. We're talking about possible fraud, more than just misrepresenting financials. This could go deeper than you think." I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. Derek had always been a liar, but this was something else. I didn't know whether to feel relieved that the truth was finally coming to light, or terrified that this was only the beginning of something much bigger. My gut told me that Derek had been hiding far more than I could ever imagine. "I need to meet with this person," I said, my voice firm, despite the chaos in my mind. "We can arrange that," the lawyer replied, "but be careful. We don't know who we're dealing with just yet. Stay cautious." I hung up, feeling a mixture of dread and hope. This was the break I had been waiting for, but it came with a price. I didn't know who this new source was, or if they could truly be trusted, but I had to take the chance. This could be the key to everything. I quickly gathered the papers again, the weight of the situation settling deeper into my bones. I wasn't just going to confront Derek, I was going to expose him. And this time, I wasn't going to let him talk his way out of it. The next step was clear. I had to meet with this person, find out what they knew. But it felt like every step I took brought me closer to something I wasn't ready for. The fear, the doubt, they gnawed at me, but I couldn't let them stop me. Not anymore. The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the clock again. Time was running out. I had a family gathering to attend, and this was where everything would unfold. Derek wouldn't see it coming. But as I headed toward the door, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Derek. "Lisa, don't push this any further. You have no idea what you're getting into." My heart raced. The threat was clear, but it only fueled my resolve. I wasn't going to back down. The morning was heavy with tension. I sat in my apartment, surrounded by papers and legal documents, staring at the evidence before me. The hours I had spent gathering the truth, piecing together Derek's lies, were finally coming to a head. I had been ready for this moment for a long time, but now that it was here, doubt crept in. Was I really prepared to take this step? The last few weeks had shown me how deep Derek's deceit ran, and it terrified me to think about the fallout, especially with my family. But I couldn't back down, not now. I had spent too many years being pushed aside, ignored, and belittled. This wasn't just about the cabin anymore. It was about my dignity, about reclaiming my life from a man who thought he could control me and everyone around him. I had evidence. I had a lawyer. I was ready to expose him for who he really was. Still, my hands shook as I dialed the lawyer's number for the last time. The line buzzed for a moment before he answered. "Lisa, it's done. We have everything we need for the next step. The evidence, the legal backing, it's all in place," he confirmed, his voice steady. "Are you sure?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The weight of what we were about to do hit me all over again. "As sure as we can be. It's time to act." I swallowed hard, feeling a mixture of resolve and fear. This was it. There would be no turning back. With a deep breath, I grabbed my coat, checked myself in the mirror, and stepped out the door. I wasn't going to let Derek win. Not this time. The family gathering was calm, almost too calm. I arrived at the house, the usual sounds of laughter and chatter greeting me as I walked in. My heart pounded in my chest. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to break the fragile peace that had settled among the family members. But I knew I had no choice. Derek's lies were too big now, and the truth needed to come out. I moved quietly through the living room, trying to calm the rising tension within me. Derek was already there, sitting at the table with the rest of the family. He didn't look up as I entered, his face buried in his phone, but I could feel his presence, like a shadow looming over me. I felt his eyes on me even before he looked up. The room seemed to freeze for a moment when our eyes met. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I could see the gears turning in his head as he realized something was off. I pushed my fear aside, knowing this was the moment. I walked toward the table, cleared my throat, and spoke, my voice louder than usual, carrying a sense of authority I hadn't known I possessed. "Derek, I need to talk to you," I said, my words cutting through the conversation like a knife. Everyone at the table fell silent. Derek's eyes narrowed, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of concern. But then his usual smug expression returned. "What is it, Lisa? Can't you see we're busy?" He tried to brush me off, but I wouldn't let him. I wasn't going to back down this time. "No, this can't wait. Not anymore," I replied, my voice firm, unwavering. "I know what you did. The fraud. The sale of the cabin. And I have the evidence to prove it." The room fell silent. Derek's face went pale, his eyes flashing with disbelief. "What the hell are you talking about?" he shot back, his voice rising. "I'm talking about your lies, Derek. The way you manipulated all of us. The way you've been using the cabin to line your pockets, and nobody, not even your precious family, knew about it." I pulled out the documents, laying them across the table for everyone to see. Derek's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. He tried to hide his panic, but I could see through him. The calm facade was slipping. "You're wrong, Lisa," he said, his voice shaky now. "This is just a misunderstanding. You don't know what you're talking about." "No," I replied, my voice steady. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. I've seen the paperwork. I've talked to the lawyer. You were going to keep the money from the sale for yourself, and I've got proof." The room was tense, family members shifting in their seats, unsure of what to make of the scene unfolding in front of them. Some looked at Derek, then at me, while others just stared, silent, afraid of the truth coming out. "Are you accusing me of stealing from you?" Derek sneered, his voice dripping with venom. He was trying to turn it back on me, trying to make me look crazy. But I wasn't backing down. Not now. "I'm accusing you of betraying everyone here, Derek," I said, my voice gaining strength. "You've manipulated all of us, and I'm done being a pawn in your game." Derek's eyes narrowed as he stood up from the table, the anger radiating off him like heat from a fire. "You don't know who you're messing with, Lisa," he spat, his voice low and dangerous. The room went silent again, everyone waiting for the next move. Derek's temper flared as he took a step toward me. His words were a threat wrapped in a smile. "If you keep pushing this, you'll regret it. You have no idea what you're getting into." For a moment, my heart stopped. The threat was clear, but instead of cowering, I stood tall. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. I wasn't going to let him intimidate me anymore. "I'm not afraid of you, Derek," I said, my voice unwavering. "And I'm not backing down. You will pay for what you've done." Derek's face twisted in fury, but before he could say anything else, I turned to the rest of the family. "I've given you all the chance to do the right thing, but now I'm doing it my way." With that, I walked out of the room, the weight of the confrontation finally hitting me. The family was left in stunned silence as I left, but I knew this was only the beginning. Derek's grip on the family was about to break. The air in my apartment was thick with anticipation as I paced back and forth. Everything had led to this moment, the culmination of years of frustration, humiliation, and betrayal. I wasn't just fighting for the cabin anymore. I was fighting for myself, for the woman who had always been overlooked, underestimated, and silenced. Today, that would change. I had gone through the evidence a dozen times, each time becoming more sure of my actions. My hands trembled, but not out of fear, out of anger, out of the realization that I could no longer let Derek control my life. The weight of my family's expectations had held me down for so long. But I was done. I had the truth. I had the power. Taking a deep breath, I picked up my phone and dialed the lawyer's number. His voice came through the line, calm but assured. "Lisa, it's all set. We're ready to move forward." I exhaled sharply, feeling the weight of those words sink in. "All right," I said, more to myself than to him. "It's time." With my mind made up, I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. The next step would be the hardest. Confronting Derek, the man who had manipulated me and my family for so long. But it would be worth it. I had to stand up for what was right, for my dignity, for my future. The family gathering felt oddly serene when I arrived. The room was full of laughter and casual conversation, like everything was normal. But my heart pounded in my chest. I knew what I had to do, but the quiet before the storm made it all the more difficult. Derek sat at the head of the table, his presence domineering as usual. He didn't even look up as I walked in. But I knew he could feel me, feel the change in the air. I took a deep breath and tried to steady my nerves as I made my way to an empty seat. The family continued to chat, completely oblivious to what was about to unfold. Derek was too busy playing the role of the perfect son-in-law, oblivious to the fact that his carefully constructed world was about to crash down. But I wasn't going to wait any longer. I had waited enough. I set my glass down, standing up as everyone turned to look at me. "Derek," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. He looked at me, surprised, but I could see the nervousness behind his calm demeanor. I wasn't going to let him distract me this time. "I need to speak with you, privately. Now." The room grew quiet as Derek's expression flickered for a moment, but he quickly masked it with a smirk. "What is it, Lisa? What's this about now?" I wasn't going to waste any more time on pleasantries. I had the truth, and it was time for him to hear it. "You know what I'm talking about, the fraud, the sale of the cabin." His face turned pale, his usual arrogance faltering, but he quickly recovered, trying to maintain control. "What are you talking about?" "You've got nothing on me." I stood tall, my voice firm. "I have everything, documents, evidence, and I'm not going to sit here and let you lie to everyone anymore." The silence was deafening. Family members exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what was happening. But I didn't care anymore. "You've manipulated all of us, Derek. You've taken what wasn't yours, and I'm done letting you get away with it." Derek tried to shrug it off, but his unease was evident. "You're overreacting. It's just business, Lisa. You're making a mountain out of a molehill." "No," I snapped. "This isn't just business. You've lied. You've deceived, and I'm not going to let you tear apart my family anymore." The tension in the room was palpable now, everyone on edge. Derek's calm, controlled facade had cracked. The once steady man was now visibly rattled. He stood, his face red with anger, and his voice rose. "You have no idea what you're doing," he shouted, his words cutting through the air. "You think you can take everything from me and get away with it? This is going to tear us all apart, Lisa." I didn't flinch. I stood my ground, feeling more powerful than I had in years. "If it tears this family apart, Derek, it's because you've already done the damage, not me." He glared at me, his fists clenched. "You're the one ruining everything," he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "You'll regret this. You have no idea who you're dealing with." His words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I refused to show it. No more fear, no more weakness. I had the truth, and that was stronger than any threat he could make. I turned to face my family. "This is the man you've been supporting. This is the truth. And now, it's time for him to be held accountable." Some of the family members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few cast doubtful glances at Derek, but others remained silent, too afraid to speak up. But I wasn't backing down. Derek's voice trembled with anger. "You think you can just walk away from this, Lisa? You think I'm going to let you ruin everything I've built?" I met his eyes, unwavering. "I'm not ruining anything, Derek. I'm just putting an end to your lies." His face twisted with rage, and he opened his mouth to say something, but I could see it in his eyes. He was losing control. This wasn't how he expected it to go, but he'd pushed me too far. The room was dead silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. But I was done. I was done being the one who was silenced, done being the one who let others dictate my life. Derek was going to pay for what he'd done. I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, leaving Derek and the rest of the family to deal with the consequences. I had made my stand. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The moment I walked out of that room, my heart felt like it was pounding against my chest. I had made my stand. Derek had pushed me too far, and now I had to face the consequences of my actions. The weight of it all was suffocating, but I was done being afraid. No more silence, no more playing by his rules. As I sat in my apartment, alone with my thoughts, I felt a wave of doubt wash over me. Was this the right choice? Did I make a mistake by confronting Derek so publicly? The fear crept in, fear that my actions would cost me everything I had worked so hard for, fear that I would lose my family, my home, my sense of self. But then I remembered what had driven me to this point. The years of feeling overlooked, the constant manipulation, the lies. I had to stand up for myself. If I didn't, I'd never forgive myself. Derek had played his game for too long, and I was done being a pawn. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to let go of the fear. The decision had been made. Now I had to face the storm that was coming. It didn't take long for Derek to retaliate. The whispers started almost immediately. He wasn't going to take this lying down, and I knew he'd fight dirty. He was a master manipulator, always playing the victim when things didn't go his way. By the time the rumors reached me, I knew what he was trying to do. He was spreading lies, accusing me of tearing the family apart, of being selfish, of not caring about anyone but myself. And he wasn't just talking to a few people. He was turning everyone against me. My phone was flooded with calls from family members, asking me what was going on, some expressing their doubts about my motives. I wasn't surprised. Derek was good at making people question everything, but I wasn't going to let him win this time. I stayed calm, answering the calls, not letting his tactics get under my skin, but I could feel the pressure building. Each conversation was another small wound. My friends and allies stood by me, but the weight of Derek's attacks was starting to take its toll. I could feel myself becoming worn down, questioning whether I could handle the emotional cost of all of this, but I refused to give in. Derek was playing his game, but I wasn't playing by his rules anymore. Then came the moment that changed everything. Derek's anger had been simmering, and when it finally boiled over, it wasn't pretty. At a family gathering, his rage exploded. He'd been cornered, and he was desperate to regain control. What happened next was beyond anything I could have anticipated. Derek stood up in front of everyone and started attacking me in the worst way possible. He dredged up personal details from my past, things I had worked so hard to bury. He called me a failure, a disappointment, unworthy of the cabin or anything else. He tried to discredit everything I had done, making me look like the villain in this story. For a moment, his words hit me like a punch in the gut. The hurt was raw. The personal attacks stung more than I was willing to admit. I wanted to crumble. I wanted to retreat into myself and let the hurt consume me. But then something shifted inside me. I wasn't going to let him break me. Not this time. I took a deep breath, grounding myself. The family was watching, waiting to see how I'd react. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. Instead, I stood taller, my resolve hardening. I took a step back and excused myself, retreating into a quiet space where I could think. I needed to gather myself. The emotions were overwhelming, but I couldn't afford to lose control. I couldn't let Derek win. I had a choice to make. I could let this moment define me, let it tear me apart, or I could fight back. I couldn't let this man, or anyone, dictate my life anymore. I wasn't just fighting for the cabin anymore. I was fighting for my dignity, my future, and the person I had become. I picked up my phone and called the lawyer, my fingers trembling as I dialed. The moment of decision had arrived. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. "Let's move forward." When I returned to the family dinner, I was a different person. I walked back into that room with my head held high. The air was thick with tension, but I didn't care anymore. Derek had no power over me. I had the truth on my side. I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of my family, and I spoke. "I'm done being manipulated," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I've made my decision, and I'm not backing down." Derek tried to argue, to manipulate the situation one last time, but it was too late. The lies were exposed. His control was slipping away, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. As I walked out of the room, the weight of the moment hit me. I had done it. I had taken control of my life. Derek was finished, but the cost of this victory was high. The family was divided. Some supported me, others didn't. And as I stepped into the unknown, I couldn't help but wonder, was I truly ready for what came next? I sat quietly on the edge of my bed, the weight of everything that had led me here pressing down on my shoulders. This was it, the final confrontation, the battle that would either tear my life apart or set me free. I could feel the tension coiling inside me, mixing with a strange sense of resolve. There was no turning back now. The consequences of everything that had happened so far were clear in my mind. I had nothing left to lose. Derek had pushed me to the edge, and I knew I had to act. The fear that had once held me captive was now replaced with something stronger. Something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. I wasn't just fighting for the cabin or the money anymore. I was fighting for my dignity, for my independence, for the life I had spent far too long letting others dictate. I took a deep breath, standing up and walking over to the mirror. My reflection stared back at me, unrecognizable in the best way possible. The woman in the mirror was no longer the passive, unsure person who had let her brother-in-law's manipulation control her life. No, this woman was ready to fight, ready to reclaim what was hers. I couldn't do this alone. I thought of the people who had stood by me through it all. They were my strength now. They had reminded me of who I was, of who I could still be. They had given me the courage to keep going, even when I wanted to give up. And today, I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for them too. I picked up my phone and dialed the lawyer. His voice was calm, reassuring. "It's time, Lisa. We're ready." I hung up, taking one final look at myself in the mirror. The woman I had become stared back at me with fierce determination. Derek wasn't going to go down quietly. I knew that. And as expected, he launched his final attack with everything he had left. The rumors spread quickly. He told lies, twisted truths, and tried to turn everyone I trusted against me. But nothing he said or did had the same effect it once did. His words no longer held the power they used to. He even tried to threaten me, talking about how I'd regret crossing him, how he would make sure I paid for everything. His threats were empty, hollow, just like him. I wasn't scared anymore. I'd seen through him long ago. Derek's desperation only made him more dangerous. He manipulated people, trying to paint me as the villain in this story. He thought that if he could make me seem untrustworthy, he could take control once again. But he was wrong. I wasn't the same person who'd taken his ridicule before. I had learned, I had grown, and now I was ready. I didn't let his venomous words affect me. I stayed calm, refusing to show any weakness. The more he pushed, the more I knew I had to stand my ground. The lies he spread would soon unravel. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. The moment had come. I gathered every piece of evidence, every email, every message, and every witness who could vouch for Derek's deceit. It was time to expose him for what he was. I walked into the room where the family had gathered. Derek was there, his smug face still trying to play the role of the victim. His smile faltered when he saw me, but he quickly regained his composure. He thought he could still win this. I stepped forward, placing the documents on the table. "I have proof," I said, my voice steady but loud enough for everyone to hear. I laid it all out, the lies, the manipulation, the way Derek had been scheming behind our backs. As I spoke, the room grew silent. Derek's confident expression cracked. The truth was undeniable. His once smug demeanor shifted into one of shock, disbelief. He had no words. I could see it in his eyes. He knew he was cornered. His control over the situation, his grip on my family, was slipping away. And there was nothing he could do to stop it. But the hardest part was yet to come. The family was divided. Some people were shocked, some were angry, and some tried to defend Derek, unable to process what they'd just learned. But I wasn't going to back down. I couldn't. I had already sacrificed too much to let his lies go unchallenged. I watched as family members turned their backs on Derek, slowly realizing that the man they had trusted was a fraud. Some didn't know how to deal with the truth, and some refused to believe it. But I had done what I needed to do. I had exposed the lies, and now they had to deal with the fallout. Tension filled the room. It wasn't just about the cabin anymore. It was about who we were as a family. Could we heal from this? Would we ever be the same? I didn't know the answer, but for the first time in years, I didn't care. I was done being afraid. Derek, now backed into a corner, wasn't done. He lashed out, making one final attempt to regain control. "You'll regret this, Lisa," he spat. "You've made your bed. Now lie in it." But I didn't flinch. I wasn't afraid anymore. Derek's threats were empty. I had already decided what I was going to do. I took one last, deep breath. The final decision was mine to make. Would I let Derek's actions slide, or would I hold him accountable for everything he'd done? The answer was clear. I wasn't backing down. I was going to take him down, once and for all. As I sat quietly in my apartment, the weight of everything I had endured finally settled over me. Derek's manipulations, the betrayal from my own flesh and blood, it all felt so distant now, almost like a bad dream. Yet it had been my reality. And here I was, standing on the edge of something new, something free. I reflected on how far I had come, from being the quiet, invisible sister-in-law to someone who no longer accepted the role of victim. My fight for the cabin had evolved into something bigger. It wasn't just about the money or the house anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, my voice, my independence. I had spent so long playing the part of the dutiful, self-sacrificing woman in the background. But no more. The last few weeks had been a journey, a painful, messy, emotional journey, but one that led me to the place I was now, stronger, braver, more self-aware. I knew that taking this step, this final decision, meant that I had to leave the past behind. That wasn't easy. There were so many broken pieces, so many things I had lost. But as much as I had been betrayed, I also had gained so much more: courage, clarity, and a sense of self that had been buried for far too long. This wasn't just about fighting for what was mine. It was about owning the choices I'd made and learning to forgive myself for the mistakes of the past. The decision was made. I was moving forward, no longer weighed down by the ghosts of what had been. The courtroom was the stage now. Derek's last-ditch effort to control everything had failed, but he wasn't giving up easily. He'd thrown everything at me: false accusations, manipulated documents, attempts to discredit my character. But as the days dragged on, it became clear that his game was over. Derek was grasping at straws, hoping that something, anything, would stick. His lies were unraveling before everyone's eyes. As the legal battle went on, the pressure mounted. My hands would shake as I reviewed the evidence, knowing that it wasn't just the truth I was fighting for. It was my future. I wasn't just defending myself. I was fighting for the person I'd become. I wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not after everything. There were moments when the stress nearly overwhelmed me. Derek's tactics were underhanded, vicious even. He tried to play on my emotions, knowing how to twist the knife. But this time, I wasn't going to let him. I was ready. More ready than I had ever been. And then came Derek's final move. I knew it was coming. I had been bracing for it, but even knowing it didn't make it any easier. He reached out to a few of the family members who had remained neutral, trying to convince them that I was the one who had wronged everyone. He threw around more lies, more twisted truths, trying to pit them against me. It was a desperate, last-ditch attempt to maintain control, but this time, it wasn't working. The more he tried, the more I saw through him. His influence was slipping. His grip was weakening. My resolve was the only thing standing in the way now. He tried to buy time with his manipulations, but they were falling apart. My lawyer was one step ahead, already countering his every move. Derek's credibility was gone. The walls were closing in on him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. It was time. The final confrontation. Derek, cornered and desperate, couldn't hide behind his lies any longer. We stood face to face, just the two of us, and for the first time, there was no manipulation, no games, just raw truth. "You think you've won, don't you?" he sneered, but there was no conviction in his voice. "I've already won," I said quietly, looking him in the eyes. "It's over, Derek. The truth is out. No more lies, no more manipulation." He looked at me, his expression changing. It wasn't anger that I saw in his eyes, it was something worse. Fear. The man who had spent years controlling everyone around him, who had built his life on deceit, was unraveling in front of me. And in that moment, I knew this was it. The end of the road, the end of his control over me, over my life. The legal victory was swift, almost anticlimactic after everything that had led up to it. Derek lost. There was no contest. The court ruled in my favor, affirming my right to everything I had fought for. Derek's reputation, his assets, everything he had worked so hard to manipulate into his grasp was now gone. I stood outside the courtroom, the weight of it all crashing over me. The relief was immediate, but there was something more. A sense of liberation. I had done it. I had fought for what was mine, and I had won. But even as I celebrated, a quiet part of me knew this victory, as sweet as it was, wouldn't erase the scars. The emotional toll had been high, and some things could never be fixed. But I was no longer that woman who had been at the mercy of Derek's lies. I was free, and that freedom was worth everything. Just as I was starting to believe that the storm had passed, the phone rang. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. It was my lawyer. "Lisa, I've just gotten some information that could change everything. You need to hear this." My heart skipped. What now? What could possibly be left to uncover after all we had been through? As I listened to the lawyer's voice on the other end, the ground beneath me seemed to shift once again. There was always more to the story. There was always another twist. And though I'd come so far, I wasn't finished yet.